Hey everyone, today we're going to discuss about the interval estimate of population mean when the population standard deviation is unknown. Remember in our last lesson, we dealt with interval estimate already. Pero in that scenario, we know the value of the population standard deviation. And since we know the value of the population standard deviation, we make use of the Z distribution. But this time, ano gagawin natin kapag hindi natin alam yung population standard deviation? We can still determine the interval estimate, but we're not going to use the Z table there, but we're going to use another kind of distribution, which is what we call the student's T distribution. Fun fact lang, this student is a pen name for the person who developed the T distribution. So when the T distribution is used, remember the two things that we're going to consider. First, the sample must be simple random samples and are taken from a normal distribution. The statistic T equals sample mean minus the population mean divided by the sample standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size is used in this distribution. So, yan. Again, T equals sample mean divided minus the population mean divided by the sample standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. We're going to use that value for T. So the critical values of the T distribution is determined using the T table. The T table can be found on page 239 on Appendix B on your book. That's at the back side of your book katabi nung table of errors under the normal curve. And I took the liberty to type all these values right there. Same lang naman din kung ano yung nasa book nyo. It's just that I just find it not pleasing kung i-scan siya eh. Mas maganda i-type na lang. And one important thing that we have to consider there on your table is we're going to focus on the degrees of freedom. Yung degrees of freedom nasa second column nung T-table niya. So, yung first column niya is yung sample size. I'd rather omit that out, remove that out kasi yung degrees of freedom, yun yung mas may importanteng use. Kasi we'll discover on another lesson na hindi na mas titingnan natin to. Mas importanteng tingnan natin to. Okay? So, ito yung degrees of freedom. Later on, I'll discuss how to determine the degrees of freedom. Then, we have the confidence coefficient, amount of alpha in two tails. Pag 90% ang confidence level, ito yung gagamitin values. Kapag 95%, itong gagamitin values. Kapag 99%, itong gagamitin yung values. So, yan. So, the degrees of freedom, DF, these are the number of values that are free to vary after a sample statistic has been computed. So, meron tayong iba't ibang ginagamit na test when it comes to T distribution. And for those tests, we have the degrees of freedom. And there are several ways on how to compute for the degrees of freedom. In this particular test, in the T distribution, we make use of degrees of freedom is equal to the sample size minus 1. Just take your sample size, subtract it by 1. And that's our degrees of freedom. So, that's how we're going to compute for the degrees of freedom in this particular case. May iba't ibang test kasi ng T distribution eh. And iba't iba yung way ng pag-compute ng degrees of freedom. That's why I'd like you to focus on this particular column na lang, yung second column nung table nyo dun sa book nyo. Rather than look at the first column. Huwag nyo nang tingnan yung first column nyo, yung second column na lang. Okay? Now, the confidence coefficient of the T distribution is found in the T table. So, ito yung value ng T. And the margin of error, we have the formula E equals T times sample standard deviation divided by the square root of N. Yung T dito, ito yung critical value natin. Gagamitin yung table para malaman yan. Sample standard deviation divided by the square root of N. If you notice, medyo similar lang dun sa margin of error dun sa last lesson natin. Z nga lang to, ito population. Dito sample siya. Yan. And again, ginagamit tong method na to if only the sample standard deviation is known and the population standard deviation is unknown. And the interval estimate is still the same. So, the population mean is estimated to be in between the sample mean minus the margin of error and sample mean plus the margin of error. Let's have an example for that. A random sample of 30 students were measured about their height. The average height of the sample is 5.3 feet. The sample standard deviation is 1.1 feet. Find the interval estimate of the population mean using 95% confidence level. So, ang first step natin dyan, we determine the variables of the problem. First, ano yung sample mean? It is 5.3 feet. Ito, lagyan ng unit para mas masaya. The sample standard deviation is 1.1 feet. The sample size is kung ilan yung students na in-interview and equals 30. The confidence level is 95%. So, we determine the critical value to be used. Unlike dun sa last lesson natin, di ba, minimemorize lang natin yung z-value. Dito, gagamitin natin yung t-table natin. So, the first thing that we do here, we solve for the degrees of freedom. So, ang formula ng degrees of freedom ay n-1, sample size, minus 1. Sample size natin, 30, minus 1, 29. Now, we go back to the table, check natin ano yung corresponding value ni t-table. So, degrees of freedom, 29. Confidence level, 95. We will look at the second column. So, 29 ang degrees of freedom, 95. So, the value of t is 2.045. If we check the table here, second column, 0.95, 29, 2.045 yung dapat na gamitin natin. Ano? Make sure to check the second column. Itong degrees of freedom, inulit ko po. If you check it in your t-table on your book, it's on the second column, not the first. Okay? So, yan. It follows that the value of t is 2.045. Yan. Yun yung sinabi ko kanina. Step 3, we solve for the margin of error. The formula is E equals the critical value times sample standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. The value of the critical value is 2.045. Sample standard deviation, 1.1. Sample size, 30. Use your calculator to compute for that. We get 0.411. So, we solve for the confidence interval or the interval estimate. Remember, confidence interval estimate, parehas lang po yan, okay? So, we solve for the lower limit. Ang lower limit natin ay sample mean minus the margin of error, 5.3 minus 0.411, that is 4.889. Upper limit natin, add naman natin, 5.3 plus 0.411, that's 5.711. So, the confidence interval is in between 4.889 and 5.711. So, at 95% certainty, 95% sure tayo na yung height ng students is between 4.889 feet and 5.711 feet. So, that is the estimate, that's our interval estimate for the height of the students. And we're referring to the entire population of students yung estimate natin. Even though we don't have any information about the population mean or information about the population standard deviation, we can make an estimate. So, yun. If you think about it, similar din kung paano natin kinukuha yung interval estimate dun sa previous lesson natin. It's just that nagkakatalo lang sa pagkuha ng critical value. Kasi in this case, we do not use the z distribution, we use the t distribution this time. So, there are some examples here. You take a look at that, you study about that. Same lang din ng paano kinukuha yan, okay? So, if the population main point na tayo, if the population standard deviation is unknown, we use a t distribution to determine the confidence interval of the population mean. Here, we use a sample standard deviation instead. So, I hope you guys learned a lot. Check nyo yung mga exams na to and try to solve for the problems on your own, then see if you can arrive at the same answer. Anyway, nandito na may mga answer key para mag-guide kayo. So, I hope you guys learned a lot today and thank you guys for watching.